that whether it is a disruption or it is a creation. So I'll start from very fundamental topic because it won't make much sense if I just try to dig in more technical stuff. So I'll start speak about from the beginning. So we have two basic vehicles that we all have been seeing. One is a combustion vehicle, which has been in industry for quite some time, and the other one is an electric vehicle. So as we know, in IC engine powered vehicle, you have an IC engine that forms the heart of it, which generally goes in front, as you can see over here. Whereas in electric vehicle, you will find a very big battery pack and a motor from where the power from the battery pack is provided to the motor, and then it goes to the wheel. So it doesn't mean that we can just remove the engine and place a battery pack and a motor and the vehicle is just retrofitted to become an electric vehicle. There are quite a few things that have to be tuned and tweaked in order to have a better design for an electric vehicle. So yeah, and this is by far the most important slide that I want to cover, that why are EVs relevant and why are EVs required in India. So as we all know that India as a nation, we do not have much oil production. We are dependent on various OPEC countries for our oil. And if we can just see this graph over here, we'll find that our oil import bill has increased 40 times from where it was in 1981. And if you see the amount over here, these numbers are for 2015, it's 653 billion rupees, which is quite high. So that is the biggest reason why India wants to look for alternatives, that beyond IC engines which are powered by gasoline and diesel, what other alternatives can we look for? So this is happening at one side of the story, and while at the other time, lithium-ion batteries, which right now form the backbone of an electric vehicle, which are the major cost part for a vehicle, its cost has been decreasing significantly in the last decade. So as we see over here, from the year 2010, where the price was around $1,100 per kilowatt hour, it is right now at 176. So there is a 10x decrease in the overall pricing. So that's where when we say that electric vehicles are have a very high sticker price, that higher or the difference in that sticker price is reducing significantly day by day. And that's why EVs are becoming such more popular as we speak today, because this cost curve is reducing and the overall cost of electric vehicle is reducing day by day, and it is making much more economic sense. That EVs cause high pollution, and sometimes you'll find the views coming from a different side that EVs are not very environmental friendly. I would say that it depends on the way we look at the problem. EVs as such, we all must agree on that EVs have zero tailpipe emission. So we are very sure on that part that the major contributor of pollution or the components which have an adverse impact on human health, that is PM, particulate matter, that PM is not generated by electric vehicles in its tailpipe. So that's where our cities will be way cleaner. Now coming on to the other aspect, where there are various organizations which are claiming that EVs, if the electricity is generated by coal-based power plants, then EVs are not very good for environment. I would not completely agree on that part, because as we see renewables as a contributor in a complete electricity supply chain in India, you will find that renewables are gaining a very strong hold. And by the time EVs become popular, renewables will be a very significant contributor. So as our diesel engine emissions are more or less stagnant over the time for the last 10 years, whereas the amount of carbon dioxide and other gases which are released, even if the electricity is generated by coal-based power plants, that is decreasing because of higher penetration of renewables. So it's an all-around ecosystem that is helping EVs to grow overall.
So it's a good thing. Yeah, it's a good thing for us. Yes, you may continue.
Yeah. So this is by large my favorite slide, that EVs adoption in India. So as you guys must be knowing that whenever you'll find some reports on vehicle electrification in India, we generally talk that India started a bit late than all the European, US, and Chinese or the other countries. But even when we have started late, India has its own specific challenges, which many OEMs are right now pointing out that electric vehicles are not making much sense because of India specific challenges. I would say that rather than considering them as India specific challenges, we should consider them as India specific opportunities, because Indian vehicle market is quite big. And right now the products that Indians love to buy are not the prime focus of the global OEMs, made with two-wheelers, four-wheelers, or even larger commercial vehicles. So if you can just see this graph over here, this data over here, right now in India, of the total vehicles sold, 79% two-wheelers are sold in the country, 4% autos are sold, 12% cars which are sold are below the sticker price of 1 million rupees. And the overall premium cars, which is right now the focus of all global OEMs in Europe and US and even in China and South Korea, these cars are costing above 1 million rupees, and they are very small percentage of the total market share that we have in India. So if we focus on this 95%, then we find that India has a very big market which is just waiting to be explored. So that is one part that I feel that is an India specific opportunity that our OEM should definitely work upon. Also, if we consider our driving patterns in our country are quite different than all the other global major economies of the world. So I guess we all have a two-wheeler. So we all know that in India, our average vehicle speed is less than 25 km per hour, whereas in all other global economies, it is at least 40 to 60 kilometers per hour. So what it means over here is that we cannot just buy something from other OEM, from global OEMs, and just copy paste and sell it to Indians. It won't make much sense because our requirements are quite different. So when our speed curves are changing, when our speed profiles are changing, we'll definitely look for different motors and different controllers. So this is also an India specific opportunity that is lying to be explored by Indian companies and even startups. Another major aspect that we have in India is that our temperature varies a lot. In summers, I guess maximum of us are from North India, even I am from Haryana. Our temperature crosses very easily beyond 40 degrees Celsius. Whereas the biggest market for electrification in the world right now, that is China, their temperature profiles are not on a very high side. Their peak temperatures are somewhere closer to 39. Now, what this means over here is that India requires very specific cooling methodologies, because the cooling methods which will work at 35 or 36 degrees won't work as effective at 45 or 48 degrees Celsius. Now, if I have a better cooling system, my advantage will be that I'll get a very high amount of cycle life and my battery can last much longer rather than lasting for just 1 or 2 years. So these are the basic I would say differences that makes India as a very interesting problem to solve. Now coming on to another aspect that is very India specific. In India, we are always working on the cost aspect. We are always worried, or as there is a tagline by a major OEM, kitna deti hai. That's a very popular selling point in India. So if we have to make electric vehicles popular in India, we have to focus on that how we can reduce the sticker price of electric vehicles. Though lithium-ion batteries price are reducing, there are multiple other components in electric vehicles as well, which need to be redesigned and redeveloped as per our requirements in the country. So I've just compared 3 components over here. One is lithium-ion batteries that by and large form around 35 to 40% of the total cost of vehicle. The second component over here is motors and controllers, and the third part over here is electronics. So specifically speaking about batteries, even though we are saying that India wants to go into the field of lithium-ion batteries, I'll cover that even in a later slide, we do not have raw material. So if we are always relying on raw material on some other countries, then we won't be able to take the total advantage that lies ahead if we make our vehicles electric. I'll cover that later as well. Also, there is the total cost of batteries that needs to be reduced. if we are just able to reduce at what global scale, at what the prices the global companies are targeting, then we won't be able to make indigenized solutions and sell it across to our country members. Now the second part is, as it is already covered in the previous slide, for motors. So this also will be explained in much more detail in later slides, but reliability and efficiency in India are very specific opportunities, or I would say challenges, that needs to be solved. So if you just, I guess maximum people wanted to work in automotive, just give you an automotive example. For in tractors, there was a very popular use case of failure. There was a very popular failure case that was very specific to India. So if you were above the rear tire of a tractor, there is a fender, which with the purpose of that fender is just to make sure that there is no dirt that is coming and impacting the driver's behavior. But what we Indians love to do over there is we install some metal frame and clamps over there, and we just make people sit on that part, which by and large is a very India specific problem. There are multiple use cases like this where we need to work on and try to work with our Jugaad mindset and come up with very innovative solutions. And the third part definitely that I want to cover is electronics. So if we just try to observe electronics as a segment, we'll find which are the mobile phones that are sold maximum. The mobile phones with maximum features, or the mobile phones with maximum features at a decent price. So the answer is very clear. We are fond of buying Xiaomi, Poco, Vivo, because they are giving us maximum features at a very good sticker price. So that's where we cannot just buy cars from Mercedes, BMW or other major OEMs and just sell it across to India. We as Indians, as a market, we require solutions where we require features but at a very minimal cost. So that is also a very big opportunity for all of us to work upon. Yeah. So I'll now cover this aspect in detail regarding motors. So I'll not go into much technical right now for any specific component. If there is anything you guys want to ask about, just feel free to comment over there. So if we say an electric motor, it has a rotor, which is the component that rotates, and it has a stator. Now generally the motors which are getting popular in electric vehicles, they have a permanent magnet, if you can see this over here. Now in India, we do not have a source where we can make permanent magnets. So we are always reliant on our neighbors, China and all other countries for it. So that is where an opportunity lies, that rather than focusing only on permanent magnets, why don't we focus on high efficiency induction motors or even new technologies like switched reluctance motors. So you guys can just Google around that, because if I cover that in much more detail, it will stretch beyond the time that is permitted to me. But we as a nation can work on different solutions in order to make Indian companies and Indian OEMs and startups survive, because there is a very big opportunity waiting ahead. So if you just see this graph over here, so the way China has captured this permanent magnets market, you will find that at least 90% of the permanent magnets is coming from China. And we as a country, we do not have any control over this. And that is where our neighboring partner is controlling the price for it. So if we, rather than relying completely on permanent magnets, if we work on some more techniques, then we'll be able to solve that problem as well. So now coming on to the other aspect regarding batteries. So there is much hype that is going on every day. Like every day you'll find news articles where people are covering that in India, companies are going to start battery production and there are multiple JVs that are occurring. But if you see this graph, this figure over here, you will find over here on the left side, I have mentioned what are the raw materials which are required for electric vehicle lithium-ion batteries, and what is the availability of all these materials across the globe. So I have compared our neighbor and our country side by side. If you see, China has got abundance of all the raw materials which are required for lithium-ion batteries. Whereas India, we only have manganese and we only have graphite. Now graphite by large is less than 2 to 3% of the total costs. of a lithium ion battery pack, the total raw material cost. The maximum cost that is required for making a lithium ion battery comes from cobalt and lithium. And we as a nation, we do not have any of these two materials. And that's where we were even delayed in acquiring some mines across the globe. Now, if we are just following whatever we did earlier and we are just now trying to coping up with China and just buying off some mines, it won't be as effective because they already have China already has a first mover advantage in this field. But what we as a country can do is we can work on different cell technologies based on what are the raw materials which are available in our country. So we have abundance of sodium, we have abundance of magnesium, and we have abundance of various other materials. Now, if we are able to develop some battery packs which have these materials, then we won't be relying on any other external country, and we can just make it as cheaper as we want using battery packs, using cells which contain materials which are available in the country. Yeah. So another emerging opportunity inside the overall batteries as a field that is very specific to India is recycling or second life usage of lithium ion batteries. So if you guys are aware about it, for lead acid batteries, India is right now around the largest country which is recycling the maximum lead acid batteries in the world. It has reached such a scale that India is importing lead acid batteries from various countries, and then we are recycling lead and trying to make new batteries out of it. Now, in a similar fashion, we can just retweak the whole system. We can work on new technologies and methods and work on recovering critical materials from even lithium ion battery packs. So right now for lithium ion battery packs, the two major cost constituents are mentioned over here. One is cobalt and the other is lithium. Now, if we are able to recover cobalt and lithium successfully, then we can create a very successful venture in India where we are not relying on other countries for the raw material availability. So that comes later, but before that, we can also focus on second life of batteries. Now, this is by and large emerging as a global opportunity, and various startups across the world and in India are working on it. That if I have a battery pack which goes in an electric vehicle, it is always considered that once it is not able to provide more than 70% of its total energy, it is not fit for automotive usage. Now, that doesn't mean that now this battery pack needs to be recycled. Now, what we can do is we can just disintegrate this battery pack, take out some modules and use it as a direct replacement with the lead acid battery packs that we have at our homes. Also, these older battery packs can still hold sufficient amount of energy, which is right now which will be much higher than what a newer lead acid battery can store. Now, this can also emerge as an opportunity. We are able to tie up with solar power plants, because we all know that we get sunlight only during the daytime, but we also require electricity during the night time. So the way solar is increasing, we are investing a huge amount by installing solar parks. We need to store this energy in batteries so that we can reuse them as per our requirement on a later duration. So that's where the second life of batteries is coming up as a major opportunity. So guys, that's from the side of what are the opportunities in India in terms of tech side. Now I'll try to cover it on a very different note. So when we say that electric vehicles are becoming popular, we always have a discussion, a pro versus con discussion going on. That where someone says that auto parts makers warn of job losses in certain EV shift. And at the same time, if we see the image on the right side, we'll find that startups and OEMs are right now looking for people who can work on vehicle electrification, because there's not much people who have this idea or even a basic understanding of how electric vehicles work. Now we can argue and we can debate for a much longer time that will there be a negative impact on jobs and what will happen, because India for like 7% of our GDP comes from automotive sector and ancillary companies from. But we need to understand one aspect very clearly, that we can just, even if global OEMs or Indian OEMs make a lobby regarding vehicle electrification, they will just be delaying the overall process. Now, what would that do is it will give a chance for other Chinese, American, European companies to launch their electric vehicles in India and then capture this market. So whereas rather than pushing for delaying this process, companies should focus on that how they can recover maximum jobs by this transition towards electric vehicles. So this is where you'll find a mindset difference between Indian automakers and global automakers, and even policymakers for that regard. Just remember this image on the left side, that Indian automakers have mentioned that if there's vehicle electrification, around 15 lakh people will lose their jobs. Now, but if you see this slide, this is what European Union transport industry that consists of various OEMs try to think about it. Now, they have a very different mindset, because they also understood that if electric vehicles are cheaper, they are affordable, they are making much more commercial sense, you cannot just make a cocoon around you and say that, okay, electric vehicles are not going to come. It has to come, it will get popular. So what can they as a nation try to solve this, do to solve this problem? So what they did was, if you see this image over here, they are saying that we understand that if IC engine are going away and electrification is coming, but if no EVs are going to be produced in India, there will be a significant impact on jobs. Now, if they are saying that if they have EVs which are sold in Europe, but those EVs are made in Europe, then they will be at par at what they required initially. Now, if you just see this image on the right side, that is what I would say, as is the logo of this community, Grow Chat. That is what a growth mindset means. They always try to cover that how we can increase the number of jobs in this sector. So what they are targeting is that even they'll try to make all electric vehicles which are sold in Europe, as well as they will try to sell their cars which are made in Europe to different other countries. And in that manner, they will employ more people than in the first place. So that's what I wanted always to pitch. I have always been pitching this across in various forums and conferences, that rather than seeing vehicle electrification as a threat, we should always see this as an opportunity. Because if we rather than try to have a passive mindset, if we have a growth mindset, then why can't we as a nation start selling out electric vehicles to various other countries? And that's where we can have a good business, and that's where we can even employ much more people than we are employing right now. EV industry for around 15,000 engineers, and industry is right now employing only 5,000. So there is a difference. If I just compare supply demand curve in whichever way you want it, there's a requirement of 10,000 people who have a basic understanding of electric vehicles, so that they can try and work in startups and help them in launching different innovative solutions for our country. But the problem that is coming is that in colleges, we are not aware of this as an opportunity. And we are just trying that, okay, I'll get into an industry and then I'll try to learn. Now, we have around 12 lakh people who graduate out of college. Now, how do we know which one is more enthusiastic regarding electric vehicles than the other one? So guys, if you are able to work on something, on some live projects on electric vehicles during your college time, that will really help you in making that leap towards electric vehicles, and that will help you to get a job much early and much simpler, because companies right now are literally waiting for guys who have a decent experience or even a basic idea of how an electric vehicle is. Some of the people over here would definitely argue that if EVs are coming, what are the different job opportunities, or what are the different fields that we can go into and try to explore and learn and contribute? If we see IC engine ecosystem, the ecosystem which we are currently working with, or we are completely relying on, we as a mobility buyer, we go to a refueling station for refueling our vehicle, we buy a car from an OEM, and that OEM gets these components from a component manufacturer which supplies different components. And then there is Then there's government, which takes tax from fuel station, takes tax from OEM, and we also pay a registration tax by whenever we are buying a new vehicle. Now, whatever is happening on the back side, on this OEM side, on this component manufacturer side, or even how are we getting this fuel from an OPEC nation, how are we defining it, how is it being marketed and sold, everything is well defined and well established. But if we try to compare it with EV ecosystem, we'll find that there is a huge difference. Everything that is required for this side, and on every side that requires to be explored. And that is where there is a job opportunity, because right now this whole ecosystem is at a very immature stage. Now what we'll do, we'll buy out a car from an OEM. That would pretty much remain the same. Either it could be a global OEM or either could that be a startup. So this point is well taken care of. But now this OEM requires many parts which are quite different from what are required to manufacture an IC engine. So there they'll get a requirement of new component suppliers, because there are new components which are coming. There will be a very significant, I would say, advantage to battery manufacturers, because batteries form a major chunk of vehicle cost. Now, what if we buy an electric vehicle? We'll require to charge it. So there we'll have a very different opportunity that will arise. That is for a charge point or a swap point operator. Now consider it from this aspect, from a job mindset. Now this charge point operator who is operating various charging stations across the network. Now this guy will require a charger from some place. Now this guy will require someone to install and maintain these chargers. This guy will also require someone to provide a platform, because right now our electric vehicles take much more time to charge them completely. So he needs to have a software platform where someone can register that, okay, I want to book my charging slot for this specific time. And then there's a very beautiful aspect that is coming up, renewable integration. So I can always have a difference in pricing based on what is the amount of energy that is provided by renewables. So all these services, if we see on the left side, they are waiting to be explored, and they are just waiting for young professionals like all of us over here who can just work on and try to come up with their innovative mindset to overall improve and increase the size of this ecosystem. Vehicle electrification in India is right now not dividing a fixed size pie in specific pieces. It is right now in a position where we all need to focus on growing the size of the pie. Because if we are able to grow the size, we'll all have a very higher size of pie available for us to survive. Now coming on to, once we have bought an electric vehicle, there will be second life of batteries that would come up. There would battery recycling that would come up. There's retrofitting that is also emerging as a business opportunity. So if we see this over here, whereas for IC engine, there were these ancillary industries which are present, but they were more or less working with a fixed mindset because everything was sorted. Whereas in electric vehicles, the whole ecosystem is right now in its immature stage, and everything needs to be worked on from ground up. Why do we need to make electric vehicles in India? Why can't we just buy it across? So if you guys remember, if anyone of this is watching this video in a laptop or in a mobile phone, you will know that we all have a smartphone, the components of which are manufactured by our neighboring country. But it did not started in a similar manner in India. So if you see this image is from a newspaper, Economic Times, I am not remembering the date. Smartphone sales across the globe started at the same time. But there was a neighboring country which focused on R&D, and there were companies in India which were only working on assembling these components and trying to sell it at a lower price to Indian people. So if you see this graph over here, this data over here, the major players which were selling a significant percentage of mobile phones in the year 2015. Does any one of you own a mobile phone from these companies in the year 2020? I'm pretty sure the answer is no. And if the answer is yes, you will find that you are the odd one out. We need to understand that what went wrong locally so that we do not repeat this mistake again. And even though we say that in India, the mobile phone handset market is a $20 or $22 billion market, But we as a nation, we must understand, we can debate on this, that we have worked a lot, companies are setting up their production offices, but these companies in India are right now only focusing on assembling these components. Now, assembling as a process does not lead to a very higher amount of economic wealth creation. Maximum wealth creation is done by R&D. That is why if you see countries like Israel or the countries like countries which are from Europe or US, they are growing at a much quicker pace than this. Now, there are some other reasons that I want us to focus on. Now, why I'm focusing too much on this slide is because the way we did this mistake in mobile phones, we are at similar stages right now in the field of vehicle electrification. Now, if we repeat this mistake, so what will happen is, instead of seeing mobile phone images over here, you will find images of couple of scooters or two-wheelers, three-wheelers, or four-wheelers, whatever, which will be from Indian assemblers and not from Indian manufacturers. And then we lose out on this opportunity as well. So the focus over here is that Indian manufacturers didn't build deep R&D or engineering capability. So this is what I want to focus on n number of times, that I prefer to go over here is. So there is a much more discussion that is going on regarding India becoming an Atmanirbhar country. So just think of this in this respect. We won't become an Atmanirbhar country if we are just not buying it from Chinese players. If we are staying in India, working on in Indian companies and trying to sell indigenously developed components to Indians and across the world, then only we can become self-sustainable and self-survival. So that's why the heading of this slide, if you see this over here, EVs are right now more of a survival concern for automotive industry in India rather than a growth opportunity. For us as individuals, we can always consider, okay, this is a growth opportunity, we can consider it as a job option. But for automotive OEMs and component makers who fail to see this shift and acknowledge that they need to work on and rewire themselves to make electric vehicle components, they will face a survival concern in future definitely. And that is why if you see, there are various component manufacturers which are working on JV partners, looking for JV partners. Now the problem with this is we will still be reliant on different countries for the technology aspect, and we will not be able to create a self-sustainable country as we ever wanted. So this was on a different note, but now coming back on vehicle electrification. Okay, so this is also an important slide for all the guys who are right now in college, that, okay, I have been receiving messages on LinkedIn from various college juniors that what are the skill sets that are required for us to enter the field of vehicle electrification. This is still a relevant question. The other question that I personally do not like is, sir, please help us in getting an intern in your company so that we can just get an opportunity and we can start learning. Now try to understand it from a different respect. Now, if I'm getting a requirement, if I'm getting this message from various guys, how do I know that which one has worked better? Because if I have an opportunity, I will not have an opportunity for 100 guys. I as an individual will always have an opportunity for 2 or 3 or maximum 3 or 4 guys. So that's what I wanted you guys to understand, all the college juniors, that rather than just focusing on that, sir, please help us in getting an intern, try to focus on what are the skill sets that you can work on. Now, if you are able to work on these skill sets, you won't require a help from anyone amongst your alumni, anyone amongst your seniors, neighbors, relatives, anyone, because you will always be able to sell yourself better in market. Because if we just see remember the previous slide, we have a requirement of people who can work on electric vehicles, but we are not finding the right talent available. So that's where we have a supply chain difference, supply demand difference. Now coming on to the next aspect that I want to cover, we always say, okay, now since vehicle electrification is getting popular, mechanical engineers, since I am also a mechanical engineer, I wanted to cover this, mechanical engineers will lose out their jobs and everything is moving towards electrical, electronics and software side. Frankly speaking, guys, this is half truth. if anything is going into production, if it has to be produced in a quantity, you will always find all these subjects that you are reading on the left side relevant. Because whenever you have something to produce, to manufacture in volume, you will have structure of strength of materials, a relevant subject that it should not break. You will have heat transfer, that the component should not fail. You will have machine vibrations. You have these vehicles, and you know the beautiful road conditions of India. You will have component vibrations which will impact these electric vehicles. And I can just try to speak on all these different aspects one by one, but I guess it's self-explanatory. So mechanical as an engineering field is still very relevant for vehicle electrification. Okay. And the other aspect is, now since it is an electric vehicle, it has caught the interest of electrical engineers as well. So I get a request from a couple of electrical engineers, okay sir, that what can we do and try to understand for getting into electric vehicle as a job sector. So what I'll suggest is, guys, that focus on your core subjects and focus on understanding. Don't focus on just cramming out stuff. Try to understand whatever you are reading, specifically for all these subjects. Now, if you are able to understand all these subjects better, you can definitely get an intern very easily. There are a couple of open source projects that are available. You guys can start learning on them. You can start working hands-on on those projects, and then you can very easily get up a job. And frankly speaking, I'll always be happy to see you guys reaching a position which is way beyond my imagination as well. So this all is possible if you guys just focus on core subjects right now, rather than trying to increase your network, or rather than spending time on Netflix. That's getting most popular right now. Okay, now coming on to the next slide. Now, if you just see these companies over here, all these companies have got electric vehicles in India. They have already launched their products. There are various other OEMs as well, which have plans of launching their products in India. Now, what I personally feel that they are just trying to optimize their products and try to sell it for meeting our requirements. So frankly speaking, I have a personal opinion over here that if you guys join any of these global OEMs, your learning curve won't be as steep as you can have, as you personally would always wish to. Whereas there are a couple of other companies, couple of other startups which are trying to work hard and toil hard and try to make electric vehicles popular, sustainable for our country. So if you see these list of companies, this is right now maybe I guess 20-25 odd companies. There are more than 1,000 startups in India which are working on core technical side of electric vehicles. So if you guys can just work on your skill set, you can apply on any of these 1,000 companies, and then you can get up a job over there and try to make your life more fulfilling and try to work on something. And coming on to that aspect where I mentioned that we as a nation will always be reliant on lithium as a raw material from other countries. There are these startups which I mentioned on the left side. These startups are working on alternatives like aluminium air, sodium air, and other metal air, and even supercapacitors are an option. So just try to work on improving your skill sets while you are at college. Then you can very easily get up a job across anywhere as you wish to. So on that note, I would prefer to end my slides, and I am free to take questions if there are any.